Okay, hey, it's the Future Proof podcast team back. It's August 14th. It's around 5:11 actually in the afternoon on the West Coast, California. We've got co-host Shane and Francesca, and we're gonna kind of dig into a couple different topics. I think Francesca's got us Jane on a kind of a new format. We're gonna see how it works. I'll hand it over to Francesca and we'll get this going. Let's see what do we got in store, Francesca?
Yes, I am extremely excited about this experimental new format that is loosely based on the idea of having lightning round discussions. These are discussions that are common in industry conferences and some podcasts. I see it on Sports Center, and it's the kind of thing where we are going to give ourselves a time box on a specific topic, and once that time box is done, we're going to jump to the next topic, and once that's done, we're going to jump to the next one and see if that accelerates the good ideas, accelerates the great discussion between us. And I'll just kick it off from there. Our first topic is a topic that I'm particularly interested in learning about because I am, to be honest, not a wearable obsessed millennial yet, in the way that many of my peers and a lot of my colleagues are always onto the latest wearable. They are very diligent about tracking their health stats, tracking sort of their lives. And I know, Shane, you are quite familiar with wearables, and I would love to know, in addition to the wearables that exist out there, where AI fits into this space.
Well, I am also really interested in that space. I wear two wearables. In fact, I've got an Apple Watch on, which I've been wearing for many years. And then maybe about 4 years ago or so, I decided to get the Whoop. And one of the main reasons why is because, well, for one, this whole area of fitness, biohacking has just been, I'm a little bit obsessed with all of it. And, I first looked into the Whoop because my sleep quality was by far the worst part about my physical health. And I had nothing really to track it. At the time, the Apple Watch really didn't do much really at all to track those types of metrics. And I found that it constantly, the Apple Watch that is constantly made me want to do more and more as opposed to just slow down. And that's really what I really loved about the Whoop, right? It's all based around the concept of a recovery score. And it provides a totally different set of metrics. Well, fast forward a couple years later, now we've got chatbots like ChatGPT, and pretty much every hardware manufacturer is thinking about how do we integrate those capabilities into these devices. So you've got big tech on one end of the spectrum, all thinking about how they incorporate their own AI models into different devices, whether it's the phone or your earbuds or watches. And then on the other end of the market, you've got this exploding scene of startups that are racing to develop their own wearables, and they all do something slightly different. And I've got something here that I'm going to share my screen for people who are watching at home, because I think it's nice to see some of the form factors. But to answer your question, AI plays into a lot of these devices in many different ways. In some cases, it's a listening device. It's always recording. It hears everything you're saying. It's hearing all your interactions. It's remembering all those interactions, and then it's using that data to then serve up, different types of recommendations. In the case of devices like Whoop or Apple Watch, it's recording a totally different type of data. It's not listening; it's measuring biometric data. So your heart rate.
So how does
populating
ChatGPT fit into that?
So Whoop is one of the few. So first of all, I only wear the two, right? So I don't have firsthand knowledge of a lot of these other devices, which I'll cover. But Whoop has integrated a GPT-4 in the form of what they call, I think it's the health coach. And when you log into the app that connects to your device, you can actually have a conversation with it. Now that's supposed to be based on the data that it's collecting. And it's collecting a range of different markers from you, right? So it's collecting things like your heart rate, your skin temperature. And then if you're really diligent about, responding to the journal requests that you get every morning, which I just don't do anymore because it's too time consuming. You wake up in the morning, it asks you several questions. You can specify the questions that you wanted to ask. So for example, it may ask you, did you drink last night? Did you smoke? Did you go in the sauna? And you can customize all the questions that it asks you. So each morning when you wake up, you just click yes or no to all those questions. And if you're really diligent about providing that information, then at the end of every week and month, you'll get back customized reports on how those different behavioral activities that are not directly monitored by the device are correlating with your recovery score.
That's cool.
So it's really powerful if you're, like I said, diligent about it. But the GPT coach comes in because you can begin to have a conversation, again, presumably based on your data. Now, I haven't used it all that much because I've asked it certain questions which I thought were very basic, but it couldn't seem to deliver, any answers to. One of the questions,
yeah.
well, I'll give you a specific example, right? So the Whoop is very personal, right? And it measures, it'll ask you questions like, did you have sex? Did you masturbate? Stuff like that. So the very first thing that I asked when the GPT coach first came out was, what's the optimal amount of times, to have sex during the week or masturbate during, and it refused to answer, right? So it's just another case of where you think of product, which is supposed to be very personalized to you and very private. You'd think that it would serve up answers that you would otherwise find out through the data, but refuse to do it.
Yeah,
that's more of a general comment across the industry.
Right.
Like you can go to Claude, just the web app, and ask that question and get a response, most likely. So I don't think it's a knock against Whoop necessarily, but it is a really good, I think, incorporation of a large language model built directly into the device.
I was gonna say that we have another topic that we might be able to talk about that with, but it's like you honestly, like all that personal data is Whoop knows because they're trying to profile you really well, and you hope that they would keep it. And if they have to use it in chat, they have to send it up to ChatGPT. That there's a way to privatize it, like I think Apple's going to do. And I think with wearables, not that I got asked the question, but I feel like Apple seems to make me feel, and I'm not sure why, but it's other than their marketing, as they say, they're more private. But I do think that, like, I do wear the Apple Watch, and it's like, who knows what it's tracking and how much AI is already in there. That's like not like the pop culture AI, because it's doing pulse oximeter. I heard they just are getting it to do glucose monitoring, which is a ton of tech, which is like really cool. But you have to think that they're using machine learning on that data that they're collecting locally. So it's I think wearables are the ones that we are seeing that have kind of like had a lot of like crash sizzle boom on the internet. Those are like the least of the ones that I'm curious about. I was actually more curious about my Apple Watch and your Whoop than any wearable, which people might not be thinking about. They might be thinking we're talking about Rabbit or
and I think we should talk about some of those, right? Because it is a big topic, and there is a race to leverage what is, I think, really cool tech enabled by these large language models to put it to use to do a lot of really practical things. And one of the promises of which where I think we're going with a lot of this text is that, it will no longer be limited to just you on a screen, typing on a keyboard, right? Whether that's your computer or your phone, we're moving very quickly to a future where a lot more will be much more passive, right? So incorporate different modalities like being able to literally see your environment, listen to the things you're saying. There are, and when I was thinking about this topic today, I was thinking, well, it's not necessarily just limited to wearables. There's a lot of interesting innovation, I think, happening just in the world of, smart gadgets in general. But I think, one of the reasons why it's so interesting is because it's a much more passive form of communication with computing. And that's where things like, smart glasses come in, they're literally scanning your environment. Different types of AI-powered hearing aids, I saw one recently, which is a device that you can customize, and you can specify, the amount of time you have and your intentions, and it'll map out a trail course for you to hike. right? So there's a range of
Right.
different things popping up for all kinds of use cases.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to sort of frame what we mean by wearables in general. I think the obvious use case from the past like 5 years has been very much health-based wearables, such as the Apple Watch is very much entangled with Apple Health, and all the iPhones now have the health app, which works, 100 times better if you're also integrated in the ecosystem with your Apple Watch. As you said, Chain Whoop, I think Aura, which are the ring format of Whoop, is also something very much based on health. I also think about wearables in terms of just the other use cases like the Meta Ray-Bans, but also just to really kind of double down on the kinds of AI that has already existed in these wearables, like noise canceling earphones. Like I think the AirPods Pro 2, which are the sort of noise canceling earphones I use, the noise canceling is almost scarily good. And that to me that's like all machine learning to really be able to isolate the sound that you want to hear and remove all the other sounds. And that is like an AI, a wearable or a device that has AI in it. But I guess what you're saying in terms of moving towards the future is moving us towards the maybe pop culture interpretation of AI, which is very much maybe the movie version of an AI pin or something that can observe your life and then decide what is next on your calendar, or maybe already think one step ahead for you. And I want to know what you think of that as a goal for just people in general, for wearables to really have that kind of agentic AI expectation. And then, if so, how close are we to that?
So first part of the question, just looking at so personal opinion, I think it would be very useful. I mean, if you just think about how useful the internet is to you in general, right? When I think of the future that I think you're describing, the question is really, do I always want access to all the information in the world whenever I want it, regardless of whether I'm sitting in front of a screen?
Do you guys watch Black Mirror, or have you guys seen Black Mirror? I think that was like, that's sort of the mental image popping in my head, is sort of where they wear the contact lens or something, and there's this just overlay on the entire world, down to maybe the scarier parts like facial recognition and having all the information on another individual. But there's also there's also the idea of like, if you see a car or an outfit on someone and you're like, wow, I really want to buy those shoes, or wow, I didn't realize, I don't know, Lexus came out with a new model. What model is that? That also pops up. So it's like that.
All of that is inevitable, because you're already starting to see glimpses of all of those use cases, but they're trapped on a computer screen or a phone screen. And I think it is inevitable. I think that the form factor just evolves over time.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
Now, do I think it's a good thing? I think there are good things about it. I think there will be a lot of unintended consequences that are not so good. I think there will be a lot of products deliberately built to do things that are not so good. There's a ton of privacy concerns. You're giving more and more data, to these companies. I think those are all things we should be mindful of, for sure. But convenience does come at a cost also, and I think finding that right balance is very challenging, which is why one of the other things that you notice if you do any sort of research into what's happening in the space, there are a number of open source projects that are coming out. There are a number of GitHub repositories that you can go on and design your own types of wearables, so to speak. And there are a number of companies who are essentially betting their reputation on, and all of their differentiation around the idea of privacy. But I do think, like, again, to have the, like all of human history and knowledge always available to you, that is a very powerful benefit. And I do want that. The question is like, how much do you have to give up to get it?
Do you think that then in that case there is a point where you go on autopilot too much? For me, I only wear one wearable and I wear it very selectively. I have an Apple Watch and I wear it very selectively for physical activity. I really like I don't turn notifications on it unless it's someone calling me. I don't use it for communication, although that is very helpful. I occasionally use it as a timer when I'm cooking and walking around the kitchen, but it's primarily for when I'm doing physical activity, and it is a very sort of specific reason I'm wearing it. But when I do wear it, I go on autopilot about everything. I don't check the time anymore that I start, like my tennis match. I don't check the time that it ends because I don't have to think about the time since the timer's going off and all of that that stuff. And do you think if wearables get to the point of really just having this agentic AI, will people go on autopilot so much? Like, I can imagine if they're being tracked on
100%.
their sleep, you wake up and you are well rested, so your calendar is like updated, like go to the gym. You have poor rest, so your calendar is updated for an earlier bedtime.
I think that's already happened for a couple generations. It's not everyone, right? Like some people do become over reliant, or all of us become over reliant at times on certain things. I think that's definitely going to continue on, especially as these agents and wearables and devices become that much more powerful. We're going to offload a lot of compute power we just don't want to dedicate to things like administration. We've talked in the past about like having to plan trips and all that stuff. Like, we just don't like when our brain's compute power is taken up by all that stuff. And so we're going to offload more and more of it to these different devices, and we'll probably go too far in the process.
Why would I, as a consumer, with a very powerful smartphone in my pocket, what is sort of the value add of having the additional wearable to help me sort of plan my life, as you kind of put
So I look at when I look at just the broader spectrum of all these different devices coming out, if you look at it just like by applications, for example, right? There are those that are meant for fitness. We talked about Whoop. We talked about Aura. I know a lot of people who wear the Aura. Personally, I don't like the Aura because it's really big. It's a really big ring, and if you go to the gym, like I don't even like to wear my wedding ring at the gym, let alone something that's like 3 times bigger, right? For me, that's like, how do you put it away somewhere where you don't notice it, right? And like the Whoop, one of the reasons I like that is because I can wear it as an armband. No one even knows I wear it. But I want it to be totally hidden even from myself. So there's fitness, there's also healthcare, right? Like, Levels is a great example of something that's constantly measuring, things like glucose, blood glucose, I believe. There's productivity. Like a ton of these new wearables are coming out specifically for, helping you become more productive, right? And there's a couple that come to mind. One is the limitless pendant. Another is Humane, which we can talk about later because they're going through massive problems right now.
Well, maybe since we only have a few minutes, we have like 5 or so minutes left. Maybe we should dive into Humane. Now, if you want to explain what
I want to make sure I finish answering your question. Like, so with productivity, like I think one of the promises of tools, like those in the more of the productivity category, that they're always listening. Right. And that's one of the ways they market their products. Like it never forgets a word. Right. Which, you immediately also probably think, well, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
The whole concept is like, we're going to record everything you do, every interaction, so you never forget anything again. Right. You're never going to forget your wife's birthday. You're never going to, one company I saw, it's like, you're never going to forget to take out the trash. It's like constantly reminding you, or you can constantly talk to it like you would a personal assistant.
I think
that's going to
happen, but I think that like you said, it will go too far. Like that will be like, some people will never do it. Some people, you'll see this weird backlash on that. Like it's like using it like when you're using a corporate computer and they're taking a screenshot of your screen every 15 seconds and saving it and analyzing it. I think that's like a dangerous slope of like surveillance capitalism. But in some cases, it actually might be a real benefit if you really need that sort of reminder.
Yes, and I think that is maybe the more articulate way of the way I was thinking about it. A few discussion points ago, which was it's sort of nice to be able to still pick and choose, and my my worry or as Anthony put it, sort of the surveillance is that you are no longer in the pick and choose sort of driver's seat. Yeah. However, I do see for wearables the computer screen is so limited in terms of just the modalities of information that it can receive. And I don't know much about what wearables exist now other than I can imagine, the Ray-Ban Meta, where, that's visual mode is going to just not be captured by my computer screen, right? Like that is, I need that wearable for it. The other thing about wearables that I think is really interesting, but maybe we don't have time to talk about it today, is the fashion aspect of it. And you see, Ray-Ban being one with Meta. Hermes had collaborated with Apple for Apple Watch for some time since I think Apple Watches were created. Jacques Mus did Humane. Not Jacques Mus, sorry. A different brand Coperni did Humane. And so you see this thing, but I can imagine for vanity's sake, I have heard many people describe the Apple Watch as like a spy kid watch there, and that being the reason they don't wear it. So that kind of drives home
did you say a spike in crime?
A spy kid watch.
Oh yeah.
Like the movie Spy Kids, and they're like, I'm not gonna wear the watch that makes me look like a spy kid. But I think that's your point, Shane, where you really want it hidden, almost as if it weren't.
Yeah. Well, remember what happened when Google Glass came out? I mean, people don't like to feel like they're being recorded without consent. And I think my hunch is a lot of people are not going to want to be around others wearing, pins or pendants or other smart glasses. I think companies now are much more cognizant of how they approach situations like that. What were you saying?
It's the you wearing, the wearer might want it, but you being in the field of view of this person wearing it that's recording all the audio, you might like so there's this like boundary of like, are you interfering with my privacy? Like, am I not? And it goes like your question, Francesca, where it's like I might lose the choice because one person's decided to wear the thing that's going to record everything that's going on in this room, and I may say something inappropriate, or I might say, like, I might make a mistake, and now that's can like that data can, like, in a way that I wasn't aware of. And so, as the Gen Xer in the audience here, or the hosting here, I would say that like some of this stuff is like wow, and Black Mirror, most of Black Mirror stuff scares me. And I know we're running on a little bit of time. I just want to, you had a question about like, I have the phone, why would I wear the wearable? And I would say, like I don't know if you remember, but the phone used to be able to tell the pulse of your, but you'd have to like hold the phone down and the camera does like the camera does. I think it's just like, if you want that data, that proximity data, pulse oximeter, walking, etc., then the device on your body makes a lot of sense, and I think Shane had also said is like, you can get it, but you're giving up something.
I think that to me makes sense. That the health applications of wearables have always been compelling to me. I was thinking more in the everything else sort of. What is the appeal of having ChatGPT on my wrist versus on my screen, for example?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example of a friend who, was telling me a couple months back that he went on a long run and he was having ChatGPT on his phone encourage him during the run. It was like he was asking it to motivate him on this long run, and he was having to speak to it through his phone. And I think That's obviously not really in the productivity category,
Right.
but I'm already firsthand seeing people who are trying to go beyond, the desktop or the laptop experience and interaction with these tools and using them more as coaches, as productivity assistants. And one of the areas that I find most intriguing is as companions. And there's a company, they haven't come out yet, but they've gotten a lot of press, My Tab. And if you go on their website, that's very, very limited information. But what I've read in the press is that it is very explicitly designed not to be a productivity enhancer. It's really more about having a companion, someone that you can talk to, get encouragement from. And I know there's a really big market for that, because if you look at a lot of the data coming out about how people are using chatbots the most, if you even look at what happened with, Meta's recent release, I think it was this week, with, the ability to create, essentially, avatars that you can chat with, personalized chatbots. Most people were using them for companionship. So there's already a huge demand for that. There's a lot of lonely people out there, unfortunately. And I think that will definitely happen. And I think that may even happen more quickly than people looking for productivity solutions.
Yeah, I agree. And Francesca, you're going to throw the
I was going to say,
right?
final thoughts before we move on to our next topic
I just
from
wanted to
either of
say
you.
one thought on the tab thing, like and I think you brought it up, Francesca, on the companion, or are we going to have it? And there's been science fiction writers that have written about this. I forgot the book that we all had magical creatures that were, and they were magical creatures that you would have, and they're agentic. They would help you. I actually think we are heading that way, and I think in ways that you get encouragement. If you're afraid of, like, walking across the street, or you're ergophobic or something like that, like, you can kind of get the coaching you need. And I think that's not pure productivity. I do think that the open source stuff, or keeping the data locally, might be a big thing. So I think there's a lot of positive. We're going to go through a lot of negative crap too before we get to the really good stuff.
I would say, like, my I guess closing thoughts on this is, there are a lot of startups. They're coming out with everything from pins to clips to bracelets, and I think people only want to wear a limited number of these things. I don't even like wearing the Whoop and the Apple Watch. I wish it all came in, one package. Maybe people have room for one more, and that's glasses or contacts. And I think what that means is you've got a very limited attention span that these startups are trying to capture, and they're also going up against really powerful, big tech incumbents who are all investing ungodly amounts of money into very similar products, which is why when the Rabbit R1 came out, I thought, okay, large action models sounds really interesting. I see the promise. We don't want to have to click through different apps on our phones. Cool. But Apple's going to kill this. Google's going to kill this. Samsung is going to totally kill this. And I don't think they're going to survive. I mean, like, from what I've heard, people don't like it. And I think it's because people already have the phones. They already got the earbuds. And those devices that we already have are increasingly able to do more and more of these different things, including companionship, including health and fitness tracking. So I think these startups are going to have a really tough time surviving unless they come out with something that's really, really cool that people feel comfortable with.
Great. Well, thank you for wrapping us up on topic 1. I think we did a pretty good job keeping it time boxed, and we'll then move to our second discussion theme, which is sort of along similar lines of what we were talking about. We were talking about maybe some potential hesitations in AI wearables, or sort of the jumps that a startup might need to make in the face of a large company. This second topic will focus mostly on chatbots, which I think are just the primary output of what we've referred to as pop culture AI that has really exploded into just a commonplace thing in society. What the current shortcomings of chatbots are. I feel like, as a researcher, this is a topic that I have had to think about basically since I understood anything about natural language processing. But when I look at the media coverage on LLMs or various discussions, the shortcomings are maybe only scratching the surface, or not practical in the everyday sense or for professional. And I wanted to like open up the space to talk about some shortcomings of chatbots as they are today that it might be worth knowing about or worth our audience thinking about next time they interact with chatbots. So I'll start with one. I think we have mentioned it more and more as we've done these podcasts, but I believe everyone here is like a pretty big sports fan. And with that just comes wanting to be very much updated with scores in real time. The Olympics just concluded, and there were so many things going on every day at a time zone that was very difficult for me personally to watch live. It also meant that I was online Googling live scores, going on Olympics.com for live scores, and not asking ChatGPT, not asking Claude, not asking Google Gemini, not asking a single chatbot what the score for, Olympics men's basketball final was. I was just searching that old school style, as might be saying nowadays. And that's really one shortcoming of chatbots that I feel like without being able to address this, I can't foresee chatbots ever becoming as powerful, for lack of a better word, as they would need to be to really sort of offload a lot of our work or a lot of just current technological infrastructure to, because these chatbots are not getting real-time information. I think maybe one of you knows the delay in terms of how far back historically a chatbot will get an answer right, but certainly not in real time. And if you do ask a chatbot for real-time information, they may just make up an answer, which is dangerous in its own way. So I wanted to start with that. You feel free to run with this criticism of current chatbot setup. Feel free to add your own. But certainly a frustration for me was, if I can't get my accurate live sports score, which is just something that cannot be falsified or at best an estimate, then that is not going to, that pattern behavior is going to
real-time information.
Yeah, exactly.
You want essentially web search.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, what do you think?
I mean, well, what's great about that is like I'm old enough to know where I had to used to buy data feeds for like websites to get like financial. We'd buy financial data, we'd buy sports data, to keep people happy, and LLMs aren't in. They can't. You can't. I know there's ways of like adding that data in there. These guys have complex technologies that can do that, but they're not a place for you to ask like real time 100% factual data. Like, so I would say a couple of responses. I was talking to a person that was very eager about ChatGPT because it gives them a lot of answers. And he was like, yeah, I don't even use Google much anymore. And so it's like, it's interesting that like, in some cases, the questions that he's asking is getting answered with Google, and because he's probably not asking a real-time question. He's probably asking something that it was like, he would probably do a bunch of searches and then go to a bunch of pages and then like learn about it. He's getting, and so I think that chatbots are going to actually start changing that. Like, I think they're going to I know that OpenAI is saying, hey, we're going to do search. I know Perplexity is doing real-time search. You have to imagine someone over Google is going to figure this thing out, right? And you'll get a blend, right? You'll get this blend. And I think, though, if you ask me, Francesca, when I'm on the Olympics, I had to ask the ChatGPT, like, or in my case, Claude, like, what kind of right? And that gave me back an answer versus like if I asked Google, it would have probably given me something generated in some links. So like, but I wouldn't ask Claude the scores, right? So I was in between, but I have to think that in 4 years, in 2028 here in LA, we're gonna have if I'm an executive at NBC or something like that, like I'm gonna say, hey, I'm starting now. I'm gonna have the most amazing way to actually get sports scores. Do you know what I mean? And data on it. You know what I mean? And I don't and if you want to chat with it, you can, and if you don't, you don't have to. But I do think that Google's, you were going to Google to get your sports scores.
Well, I was going to Google to get some real-time sports scores, which I do for sports. I was actually just going to the Olympics official
Right, you were
website,
going, yeah,
to get the scores.
Tennis,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think you raise a really excellent point about how important real time is. Sports scores are instantaneous, but for me, real time could be as recent as the stats from yesterday's basketball game or something. And I think about fantasy football season coming up, where there is going to be so much data that people would like to know. And wouldn't it be great if your favorite chatbot could just tell you who to draft, how your lineup should be adjusted every week,
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing in the just hard to believe sense that that we're not quite there yet for just how many other things people could possibly just be using ChatGPT for.
Yeah, and I think that the internet really kind of changed sports data in a profound way, and I actually think that where you're going to see what you want in a sort of in a chatbot way, where you could be trying to if you're going to draft your league, you're going to figure that out, and I actually think that interestingly, I think with Claude, if you spent the time, you could actually import a lot of that data into Claude and start asking it to make thoughts on it. And I think Google Gemini, I think those things are really close to happening. You know what I mean? Where you can kind of build your own corpus of data and kind of get your chatbot to respond to you. But I think that will just get all wrapped up into an app really soon. I bet there's an app already floating around on Clint's test flight that's doing this.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I love Perplexity so much, right? It's combining elements of search and the chat experience, and it's really powerful as a result. But all of these big tech companies are definitely, Google, obviously they've been working on a solution. They have their AI generated summaries appearing on search results, Search GPT from, OpenAI's version of, real-time search with chat capabilities. That's coming out soon. And I find it interesting that if you go on the Search GPT landing page, they give a lot of real estate to publishers, right? Like The Atlantic, for example. They got a big quote from the, Atlantic up on the page. And I think it's not just because people want the real-time information, but, one of the big themes in AI now is that there's all of the original data that was used to train these models, creators are not getting proper attribution for. So I think, search, real-time search, with these chatbots begins to address the issue of how, someone who's the original creator of content gets properly credited when their content is actually showing up in the answers, right? Because now if you're chatting with ChatGPT, for example, you just get the answer back, but you don't know where it came from, right? So it's definitely going to happen. But I also think it's, partly just the inherent limitations of the LLM,
Yeah, I got a reverse question for Francesca, because Shane just made me think of it. Sports scores are instantaneous, 3-pointer, 8 3-pointers by Steph in the fourth quarter winning the Olympic, that kind of. But do you see that as a result of all these other people that want that data to enhance their perhaps models or apps? Do you think that that these leagues go to a place where they stop that data flow? Literally, it's not they literally try to not. So you have to the only way to get it is you're listening to a radio or watching a television, and then you're typing the scores in. You don't pump it out on the internet.
Do I think that will happen?
Yeah. Do you think that is that you know what I mean? They shut the source down, so you have to actually watch the live show.
I don't think so. I think. We already don't get all the data from a broadcast anyway. Maybe basketball, it's a little easier to feel like we have all the data on a player's performance because they are very much, these discrete numbers and these very well packaged profiles of data. Like you can easily just download someone's points, rebounds, assists, etc. If you think about the NFL or tennis, there is a lot of visual data that gets captured by IBM, for example, or AWS for the NFL, IBM for tennis, where we don't get any of the data that they show on the broadcast about how high a ball is bouncing, how fast the ball is moving through the air. We don't see AWS does all these very fancy what is the percentage this pass was going to get caught? What is the high percentage play? And you have to tune into the broadcast to get that information. So I already think we're experiencing, at least from a very, everyday viewer, I get the data that is readily available. And I know that's only a fraction of maybe the ultimate insight into an analysis of a player's performance. So I don't think the pipeline for at least those very, what I think of them as almost like baseline data points that, right now, because it's just so commonplace. I did want to move on to a different shortcoming of chatbots that maybe you can speak to in more detail, Anthony, but you termed it copy paste fatigue.
Yeah, copy paste.
And I want to know what you mean by copy paste fatigue, and maybe it is something that will sound very familiar to the listeners as well.
Yeah, I'm actually, it's funny because we know that we're getting listeners that are just like, I know someone reached out to me and was like, hey, I just listened to that podcast. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's really cool, right? So we do have a lot of,
we'll do a better job to make sure.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so, the copy paste fatigue is like, if you're using, a chatbot as much as like, maybe the three of us are, or you're spending a lot of time, talking to something. Like it's almost like you're texting something, and then, but that text coming back is a lot of information that you want to like copy and move into something that you want to use eventually in something like maybe a presentation or an email or a blog post or a LinkedIn post or a job listing or, retail listing. And so when you do that over and over and over again, it's the fatigue. I also call them digital drudgery. It's drudgery. It's like you're just like, I'm tired of doing this. It almost put enough speed bumps that even though even though AI speeds it up for me, the mere fact of like doing that is I'm just done with that, right? And so you want a better experience, and I think that's what I meant by the fatigue. And we're seeing apps like Perplexity and Claude somewhat address that. They're actually almost making it a little bit more of a final product. So like you can like chat with it, but it's actually building you like a presentable web page at the end of your session. Like you could be like, okay, now okay, chatbot, like I've given you 10 things to do. I like this. Now write it all again for me. And then you watch it, and it's like it kind of gets you there. So you're maybe doing like you're doing less copy paste. And so I think that they're addressing that because I think they are seeing that like you don't want to be there, and especially when you're coding. Like if you're like not a coder that's coding in VS Code, which is an editor for some folks that are not familiar. There's an editor that you can write your code in, and you can do a lot of completion, and then there's some inline ways that you have your code edited, so that's reducing the copy paste. Copy paste is actually like a context switching thing that bums people out. So that's a real problem. But I think it's just a writer. You just don't want to do it. And I'll end with this. Google, who I think needs to win here, so I'm being critical, hopefully to inspire the Google listeners here, that they need to make their inline product in their Gmail better, because I don't know if you guys have used it, but like you go like, okay, make this better, and it somehow like puts it in a weird place. It makes it so much more clunkier than I'm just like, I'm not even going to use it because its interface is terrible. And so I just feel like if you're going to help me make my email better, like just literally do it like if I'm writing code in an editor.
Yeah. I have a question. Go ahead first.
On the copy paste thing, one thing I wish they got better was just being able to paste in the format that you got it back when you were in the chat session, right? Like so often you get back something, it's beautifully formatted and bolded and bullet point and everything. You click the little copy button, you move over to another document, you paste it in, and now it just looks like total chaos. And, it's a minor thing for all the amazing things it does, but like that's a complaint. I also, one of the things I loved about WhatsApp when it first came out is that you could reply to specific messages. And I would love the ability to be Claude or ChatGPT and go back to a specific thing that I typed or a response that it came back with and respond just to that, right? Like, hey, like I want to reference this part of the conversation an hour ago. Let's iterate on that, whatever it may be. My biggest complaint though with these chat agents is just the refusal rate. You ask it something and it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It's against my policy. It doesn't even have to be. It doesn't have to be something as terrible as building a bomb, right? Like there's everyday questions that people want answers to, and these agents they just refuse. And that's one of the main reasons why I think these open source models hold so much promise. Because you're going to get the information on the open web anyway. And I'm really not a fan of these bigger organizations limiting what we can and can't talk about just because it's in chat format.
So Shane, or Francesca, I don't know, but it's like it's what's so crazy about that. It's so frustrating that look, I don't want to sound like I'm against the researchers that are really, really thinking about AI safety, but I appreciate and don't want to alienate them. But at the same time, it's like I get it. It's your AI, it's your data, it's your stuff. But it's like you can literally just go on. If you're on Reddit, you can see the most crazy stuff that's like way beyond inappropriate by just agreeing that you're 18. But like in a chatbot, I can't say, "Hey, chatbot, like I'm cool with some spicy takes on stuff." I can't do it, and that's a limit to the data set, right?
Well, that leads very nicely into the question that I wanted to ask, which was, in some ways these are very much limitations, on the model itself. I think the inability to get very, very real-time data and like get that data, train the model, have that like push to production, etc., and then come to the user. Like that is very much a limitation on just the process of the technology, as is maybe some of the criticism in maybe why the writing might sound unnatural or why a bot might hallucinate because it is just making a statistical best guess, right? But then there's also the limitation on the format of it being a chatbot itself, like copy paste. I think copy paste is the sort of embedded pattern of behavior because we're dealing with chatbots. And if we were dealing with a different kind of, mode of delivery of this large language model, we might be just having a completely different pattern of behavior that has nothing to do with copy paste, right? And to me, that is sort of the chatbot format, I think, has been very compelling because you could ask a very complex question and get a single answer for the most part. I know, like a text to image generator will give you options, or you could have some sort of way of getting multiple types of answers. But for the most part, if you ask a question, you get one response. And when that's coupled with like sifting through large amounts of data, or sifting through many examples, that's like great, right? But that also, I think, is the reason why the refusal rate and, things of importance like AI safety or just in safety in general is like those questions come up because of the chatbot format, in that, sure, that information is very much available on Reddit, but that is a lot of digging that you have to do. That is a lot of sort of legwork that you're doing, and it is kind of on you to parse through all the dump of info right out there. Whereas the chatbot is serving you info on a platter in like a second.
Right, and it's actually, I think there's probably some deeper legal stuff here that it's also producing it. So when you're in a Reddit, you have there's a set of laws that allow you to like, hey, Reddit didn't make this. It was uploaded by another user, but it's like in ChatGPT, it's like, no, our word calculator through a probability mechanism.
Yeah, through data that we curated ourselves. I mean, this reminds me of, I don't know if you remember, this might have been in one of the first podcasts that we as a trio recorded, but we were talking about why, how much we would have appreciated a community, sort of a community-based feature on these chatbots, in the way that Stack Overflow or Quora, even, you can like upvote good answers and you can really downvote bad answers.
Right.
And it's the same with like comments on YouTube. And none of these chatbots have any sort of community aspect, which I think would maybe address some of these concerns, or at least address it in a format that is familiar to people who have been online for decades and are very much understanding of what an upvote and a downvote means.
Yeah, and I know Shane wants to jump in here, but I do think that, like, so we're talking about the interface of chatbots, right? And that's one thing. And now we're talking about its data. And we are, and by the way, like, I actually, whether Mark Zuckerberg and Meta actually wanted to go open source, he's forcing this open source thing to happen. Let's say that was by design or by just like he got forced out of hand. But if we were only left with maybe 3 mega frontier LLMs, like closed labs, they could just literally make that language model, like, however safe, or if we're using the word safe, however they see the world, they want the world to actually sound via their product, which is their right. It's a free world to actually do that. If they didn't have the open source thing, it wouldn't give any tension for them to change. So actually, when you start talking about what's frustrating about the chatbot in its data set, is that we might think it should be more open, like a community thing, but it's like, they could just say, no, this is our private product. Like, this is the way we see it, and this is the way you get it. You don't like it, go somewhere else. But if there's only 3 of them, and their engineers are all trading seats at, I'm now at Anthropic, now I'm at Cohere, and now I'm at like OpenAI, their same mentality, you're never going to get this breakout renegade sort of like data set model, which I think the open source stuff, thank God, allows that to happen.
Yeah, and I'm gonna echo that before I give Shane the last word, and then we move on to our third topic. But I mean, you're completely right. With open source, is just inherently community led and driven very much by community participation. Think of, I believe, again, referring to our earlier podcast, I hope this means people who are tuning in for this episode go back, if you go back and listen to these podcasts. But like you said, open sourcing Llama for Meta, it gives you just this community engagement for the development of your model, really accelerating the development of your model. But I think of Cohere for AI, which I was telling Shane and Anthony about. They have a multilingual language model. So this is the sort of research nonprofit of Cohere. They have a multilingual language model that is also community driven. It is an open framework. I think there's something on like 130 plus languages. Like, you don't get that without the community engagement, right? Like, you could be a large closed model with just all the data that is online in all of these languages, but you still don't get that kind of interaction and maybe usability even without the community engagement for a very large multilingual language model. And I will hand it over to Shane for the final word on this.
I think that's a good way to wrap up the section. I mean, we've gone into detail on, the open source movement. It's far too much to cover even in a whole podcast topic. But, I think, these closed models sometimes make me feel like you're in a car with the kid lock on the door, right? And the open source, I think, really just, it's more about freedom. And I think but it's still not going to solve all the shortcomings of these models, right? Like, it's not going to solve some of the more, practical usability issues, like the copy paste thing. It's not going to solve, is this going to sound exactly like a human? And quite frankly, that's also a complaint, but I'm kind of happy that it doesn't sound exactly like a human, because it forces you as a human to go in and edit it and put your own personality in it. I don't think it's going to last very long. I think we're going to a future very quickly where the outputs come back and it's now better than 99.999% of writers on the planet.
I think it's there now. I'm
I
sorry.
think it is
I
already there, but
disagree.
we're gonna
I
jump a
think
few more
it's
orders of magnitude.
maybe that
Um,
can be our next sort
yeah.
of maybe an equivalent blind taste test of writing samples. I mean I find it quite unnatural sounding at the moment,
I
but
do too.
yeah.
But this is the thing about chatbot. Like we're in this phase now where like being a prompt engineer, I think means something, right? You have to
Mhm.
like know the words to give it,
Right.
as
Yeah.
you have to be really crystal clear with your guidance and know the little hacks like role playing with the hey, I
Yeah.
think in terms of this role, here's your task, like little ways you can kind of hack it. That can take a lot of time to learn, but I think that's not going to last forever. We're going to get to a point now where it's like just so good at inferring exactly what you mean, and maybe there's a body of work that or history that you've had with the agent that it knows exactly what you expect. I think what's the feature from Claude Projects is a great example of that. It's basically like RAG built in, where you can upload a bunch of documents, and
So
now you've basically got your own version of Claude. So yeah, everything's moving so fast.
we've exhausted our time, but
Yeah, let's
maybe Francesca can afford us
Yeah.
let Francesca run the show because I think we're out of time on that one, right?
Well, I can ask the next and sort of final topic, and you could give your answer because it might fit very nicely. But to sort of cap off our episode today, I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended, which is, we've talked about wearables and how AI has fit into very popular, wearables that have existed for half a decade or decade plus. We've also talked about wearables that are up and coming startups, what kinds of challenges they might face. We talked about current shortcomings of chatbots, different chatbots we interact with, different search engines, and how they might transition to chatbots. It's very much been on what exists today. So my last question is purposely open-ended to ask you, what AI tools would you like to see? What AI features would you like to see that you haven't seen yet? And I'm pretty happy to kind of throw realistic suggestions out the window, kind of maybe ending on, what kind of cool thing would you like to see an AI do? For maybe lack of a better or formal way of phrasing that question.
Yeah, I mean that's such a. I mean, so I'll keep it somewhat reasonable because I do think that we're like real ML engineers are finding things with health that is like really quite remarkable, and I think that sort of like AI kind of work isn't really talked about as much as we should. We tend to talk about like the practical AI, like hey, write this or do this, which is also really cool. So I think like I want the market to allow. Like, this is not about a product, more about like a wish for the advancements in ML and AI in neural networks, like the deep learning, to really flourish in that world of solving real medical problems, just the full stack. Like we needed to go there. I mean, in order for that to happen, we need a lot of money to go there, and we need a lot of entrepreneurs to be able to actually disrupt what's happening in medical right now because it's really locked down on and maybe rightfully so, on how doctors and practitioners and hospitals and organizations can actually deal with data. So it's like we're not seeing like innovation there as practically as fast as we probably could. And I would point you, the listener, if you agree, to really listen to what Andreessen Horowitz, the folks that run that company, it's A16Z podcast. They really have spent a lot of time dissecting what's not happening in healthcare. So like I want to throw that out there, but like on the practical side, just for me, I think day-to-day office kind of like worker that has like various sets of data that they have to deal with, like, processing forms, or like just looking through data. Like I'm looking through tons of Google data or traffic data or ad data, or, what I really want us to get to in short order is you get like a blank board, like a Figma board or like a Miro board or something like that, and you just go like, I want something that looks like this. You know what I mean? And you draw it out, and you can kind of explain the output that you want. Like I want, and then you basically could say, okay, like it could then automatically sort of say, I need access to all this stuff, and you could start figuring out how. I mean, it builds you the pipeline to do it. It doesn't implement it. It just builds it. It might say, well, I need access to this. I need access to this. I need access to this. And then it could say, if I had the access to this, I could simulate with synthetic data how I could get you this output. Look, and you don't need to do very much. You don't need to talk to your IT administrator. You don't need to do anything. It's built this pipeline. It's contemplated. It might ask you a few questions like, do you have access to SEMrush, or is it Shopify? It asks some really quick questions for you. It builds this template, and then it's a work order for you to kind of maybe go step and fetch and grab some stuff for it. But like once you did that, it's actually built you a functional agent pipeline for you based on the output that you need. Whereas right now, you kind of have to actually know a lot more than you need to know. And I think these things are, so I really want agent workflows where I might have to like contact multiple systems, contemplate where an LLM can contemplate like, hey, either there's a slow API or there's a fast API, or like it knows how to contemplate that because it's designed to think that way. But you as a user, you're like, I just want this output. And when you give it the output, you don't need to keep telling it that's not the output you want. It's like, let the AI have a gain, like an adversarial network on that, saying you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And it's like, it can find out how it's not gotten there, right? I don't need to do that. And if I have to wait like a day or two, I'm fine with it. Like if it asks me critical questions, like I cannot get access to this because I don't have the secret keys to your Amazon S3 repository. Fine. I don't even know what that is. I'll go get it for you, right? But it's like it sort of sets that up for me to be a winner rather than me not even know where to go. Because if I'm an office person, I know what I want it to look like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I should be able, and computing should be able to offer that. And that's where I will. And I think that's near best. We should have that. We should.
I mean, it's funny because I was talking about this concept not in the context of having an AI agent do it, but just in general. Like, when I approach a task, I see the big objective, which to me sounds like the everyday professional going, this is what I want. But the only way that I can really achieve that big objective is I love to just like break it down into my various steps, and until I have that, I can't even get started. So to me, it sounds like you want that workflow kind of done for you by an AI agent, right?
Yeah, it's almost like, well, and by the way, you're like, if it's esoteric and you don't know what your output is, so it's a little bit more and more, then it's like you probably can't you can't reverse engineer. But if it's like you're like
build a website, design a landing page, or
and something even more complex than that. Like think about this. Shane and I are often talking about it's like we want to show on these given topics, we want to show velocity, and we want the graphic to look like this. Like I just want to draw it and say I want velocity on this. I don't frankly care how much data you need to go get that. Just make it look like that. Like, and if it's running into trouble, it asks me, because it's like, then I'm like, I could be helpful for it. But like right now, it's like I could express I love the outputs on these topics this way, but it's like I don't want to break down the problem. Like you break down the problem. Like, that's why you're an agent and I'm a human, and I want to be like, I want a cheeseburger. Oof, I get my cheeseburger. I don't care how I don't read the whole supply chain, but I do want my cheeseburger. Right? So I feel like that's where I think that's where an average worker would want to be, where they could say, I think I want this, or I want this data this way for my boss or my team, or I want my team to give me this data this way every way, and let them figure it out. I think that's where agents need to go, and I think you'd see a lot of innovation. To me, that's the space race in agents. And I think a lot of people, if they address it that way, you'd see a lot of companies have winning products to say, hey, in that space race, we figured it out this way. And as soon as a company and companies adopt their way, I think you have so much lock-in because you're not going to want to leave. Just like Amazon's got you locked in, you're not going to want to leave. If you figured out how that agent works, it's always going to have its own picadillos. You're going to be like, fine, I know how to make it work. But those workflows will end up being very durable, and you'll not leave, and you'll be able to like make a lot of money doing that.
How about you, Shane? What are some AI tools or features or products that you would like to see that you haven't seen yet? And I know you know a lot of tools, so I'm curious to hear what you'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking when you first asked the question, I was thinking of numerous occasions working on totally different projects where you find some tool and it does some really amazing thing, whether it's image or video generation or research or whatever it is, and then you very quickly find out what its limitations are, and it's like, that was so awesome, but like I wish it did this next thing. And that's why I think what Anthony's talking about with the agents is actually like, it's kind of like this holy grail right now that a lot of people are chasing after for exactly the reasons that Anthony is talking about, right? Like, you want something that's not just, you want something that doesn't require you to sit there constantly and babysit it and continue to provide it feedback and guidance and course correction. I think the promise of agents is like, you can just give it a project and it can go off. Like, I don't want to have to sit here and continue to steer you in the right direction. I think instead, and this is where I kind of will bring it back full circle to the wearables. If I had a agent that prompted me instead of me prompting it, right? It's like, what do you want to accomplish today? Or what do you want to accomplish with this business or this project? And then it just continued to probe me for questions, right? And then based on all of my feedback, put together the makings of a high-level plan. And then we started getting into the details. Like, well, how are we going to go out and execute this plan? What are the resources we need? Like, I think we're definitely heading to that kind of future, and it would be relevant for any number of projects. But I also think, for me, like, one of the reasons I love these wearables is because like I do want to know the data on what my body is saying. I think you can have a similar type of, relationship or capability purely in the health and fitness space, where it's like, hey, look, you need to watch your blood sugar, or, you should get more sleep, or, this is what's in your fridge. Like, you should stay away from, that particular food item or whatever it is, or like, you should go grocery shopping for this because like, your biometrics are off in, whatever way. Like, for me, it's really all about just like being more proactive, and project based, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of smart homeware is really, really fascinating. And I think there have been some, very niche products out there that somewhat do that. I know there is some, I don't know what it's called, but like cocktail maker where you just kind of buy the machine and some set of ingredients, and then you can like pick what cocktail it makes for you. And that kind of thing. And I think a product like this wasn't going to be my answer, but I think a product that really just scans your fridge and of course is probably connected to some health wearable. Like, if it could scan my fridge and it knew that I wanted to make a certain kind of like pasta tonight, and it knew I didn't have that ingredient, the workflow would be sort of looking at the fridge and recognizing my ingredients, knowing what I want to make, also being able to pull up a recipe, comparing that to the ingredients, and then putting that into my shopping list, and then I can go and actually get it. Like, that would be really, like, that is smart homeware to me.
That is like,
aren't there refrigerators that do that now? Like, they'll scan your refrigerator and
I'm sure there are
a recipe or something.
Yeah, but then I guess it's the step of, right, it's the step of me going, I want to make an apple pie, and that's all I'll say. And I guess it's a combination of both of your points. It's all I'll say. And Anthony, you'll get that big objective, I want to make an apple pie, and all the various things are telling you exactly like
So
what.
here, I'll one up you on that because I think
Okay.
that's a great thing, and I don't know how we're doing on time, but
No,
like
we're
on
good.
the prompting of Shane. So let's say, I have a family, but let's say we're all connected with our wearables, right? Our prompt that you just talked about, Francesca, as an agent, and I think this is totally possible. That's the thing. It's not like this is impossible right now. This is, for the listener, like what I'm about to say is possible. But you could literally say, like, it starts with a baseline, knows what's in your fridge, but it also knows that your purchase history. So you have to like say, I'm going to buy my stuff from Amazon. Fine. So it knows what you bought from Amazon. It knows what's in your fridge right now. It sends you a message, hits everyone, says, are we going to eat? Do you want pasta or do you want this? Because it knows what's in there. No one wants that. It says, great. What do you want? This, you need to order this. Great. Or it goes and orders it. It's like it did the problem solving of the 4 people. It knows what's in there, knows what you have, probably knows that you need to have a little more pasta, so it buys a little more. It buys it, it gets it delivered, you get it. And then it also knows that you need the recipe like in a tight format, not like buried in like long blogs and it's like, and it could do all of that right now. And I think that would that homeware would save so many families time and just frankly money and energy of like coordinating food purchasing, ordering, ideation of food, voting on it. That's all doable now, and that would be so much fun to have.
I think it'd also be a big help for things like food waste, like just like totally optimizing exact quantities for, whatever it is you need.
Yeah, so my answer was not about planning meals, but it was sort of, I had 2 things that came to mind as both of you were talking. The first thing, it wasn't about meals, but it kind of hits on what you were saying, where it's really difficult for an individual to plan for groups. I mean, it's difficult to plan anything, especially to plan and execute things well, but particularly for groups. And 2 use cases that I feel like I am always finding myself in and finding it difficult to do is planning a group trip. And by that, I really mean from ideation of that like seed of, hey, should we go on a group trip? All the way to the execution and getting to the group trip and the group trip going smoothly. The same with event planning. And you can think of like someone planning a wedding. There are so many variables. There's travel to consider. There are dietary restrictions. You have a variety of guests coming at different ages, of different interests, all of that stuff. And I think, I don't know what the tool is, and I've seen various ads or startups that are, maybe trying to make trip planning easier. I know there are many apps that at least make splitting expenses among a household easier, and so those have, I think, really kind of revolutionized certain patterns of behavior, like splitting rent, like splitting groceries or utilities. But I'd love to see what the next step looks like in terms of just kind of planning group recreation, planning group socials. Maybe it is a matter of embedding more of that community aspect into current AI frameworks of like, yeah, guys, like, where do we want to go on our group trip? I could see this for, office managers at the workplace, like intern onboarding, intern socializing, a holiday party. Like, these are all things that I think have so many moving pieces and no consolidated place or tool to actually help with that. So I think that would be an interesting thing to maybe capitalize on if there is some company out there already working towards that. The second thing, kind of also bringing it back to wearables, I think language translation has been one of the sort of earlier uses of natural language processing and machine learning that remains effective to date. Like this has been, Google Translate has been a thing since as long as I can remember it, as long as I can remember trying to study a foreign language when I was like young. And Translate has had many evolutions. I think the Translate app on the iPhone is really useful when you're traveling to a foreign country and you can type in something and just click. Your iPhone's always with you and it translates. It's nice that Google Maps has that feature where you could also just play the audio of some location that's in a foreign language. And I wonder if there is some potential language translation wearable crossover. I think the act of kind of getting your phone out, typing a sentence, communicating with someone, they're doing the same on your end, like that is effective in terms of just getting the point across, getting the communication done, but it is kind of cumbersome both physically and visually and maybe even socially. So I wonder, if I were to circle back to our original talk about wearables, I wonder if there is some, I mean, this technology exists in
I have to think it's one of the first things that was tackled by a team, especially Google. I mean, because Google now has two essentially competing products that do the same. They've got Google Translate, and then they've got
Right.
Google Gemini, and they're both actually quite good at translation. But I know they approach the translation process differently, right? Like Google
Mhm.
Translate is more like word for word translation, where I think, Google Gemini, just like very obviously, and I from what I've heard, tends to capture the meaning a little better, sounds a little more natural. But they've had a series of announcements all week. With the Pixel event, they got a number of devices coming out. Pixel 9 coming out, the Pixel Pod, earbuds coming out, and those will all have Gemini, capabilities built into them. And I'd be shocked if they didn't have real-time translation.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the next, that's where translation kind of needs to go. And I know there are forums, like famously in the UN, you can see people wearing earphones all the time. And but it's sort of getting, for me, it's getting that to the point of seamless interaction, which I personally feel like while the iPhone is effective, while Google Maps translation is effective, that is not a seamless interaction for me.
I'll give you a funny story with the Translate. So
yes, please.
Natalise and I were in Sicily last year, and we were staying with friends there, Italian friends, and two of the three friends we were with did not speak a lick of English. And we were hanging out with them the entire time we were there. And we were speaking through the phone the entire time.
Yeah.
And so you could see the real-time delay of like, okay, speaking it to the phone, okay, showing the phone.
Yeah.
Which obviously introduces some friction there, but like it was also such a delight to like, be able to connect with somebody that you otherwise wouldn't be able to, even if you had to go through the phone, which just created comedy for everyone also in the process.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it works. And I was initially worried that it would take more attempts than I actually ended up needing. I mean, it's pretty much a single attempt process, and as long as you're kind of quick with the phone and quick to pull things up, it's pretty easy to get done for sure.
Well, I know that you're managing time really well, but I will say, just on that note, we were talking to a pretty senior level medical doctor, and as well as he's also an MBA, so he's going to counseling institutions on things. And when we started talking about patient care, he's like, yeah, sometimes we need to get a translator, but you have to like call on the system, so it's almost easier to use the phone, right? And so when you're using the phone to translate, you're like you're now in some sort of chat GPT or possible translate thing. So they are getting the data, and you can see how the benefit of, like, if I'm a doctor and I'm trying to explain to someone like, hey, you're patched up, you need to go to the next doctor in line. And if you can't speak the language, you can't wait for a translator. It's not rewarding. And so translation just in to the medical field is like so important, right?
Yeah.
Because when you can't talk to them, he said something really funny or really interesting. Well, first of all, you can't talk to somebody if they're not conscious and you're trying to resuscitate them. But he said, like, we're doing like veterinary medicine. Like, we can't talk to you, but we're just going to move through the motions. Like, we can see that you're bleeding, you got a broken arm, but we're not able to talk to you. But like, if you could remove that, it totally improves patient care. Like it totally makes someone who's anxious or who's afraid what's going on, and the doctor's not worried. It's like, so solving that in real time is a huge success for humanity.
And let me add, before we wrap up, language is not just delivered orally and received by sound. You know, there is a whole visual element to language that clearly multimodality in these large language models will lend itself well to just the various ways in which language could be delivered and received. So
That's right.
I think that is
That's one of the reasons why you've got a lot of people working on things like smart glasses. Like you're not going to get that multimodality unless you've got some way to capture it all.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think of even sarcasm, facial expressions, humor, like that is, that is all complementary to how we're interpreting language, right? So
I in my past life, Francesca, I worked a lot with experimental animators and animators.
Cool.
And I was on the teams of these. We spent enormous time trying to communicate an emotion through a small facial gesture.
Right.
And when it's nailed, you need no script. Like it's like Bambi's sad. It's like Bambi's like it's this like these and so like you're right. Like language is like it's like we're hearing, but it's like no, it's the totality. Humans work in totality.
I mean, I mean, I guess before I move on to sort of letting Shane give closing remarks about us and sort of what we're doing outside of the lightning round, I would say with the smart glasses and all of that, language is very much affected by the environment as well in which it is being delivered. And if you can just get more and more information through your wearable, through your device, through the large language model that is helping you interpret this communication, like I am very curious to see where that goes, particularly because language translation is something that has been pretty reliable in the grand scheme of things for basically as long as I can remember.
Yeah,
Right.
what this is making me think is about your question about over-reliance. And I studied foreign language growing up and in college, and I actually moved to China and lived in China just to learn Chinese, and that's all I did.
Right.
Like 15 hours a day, 7 days a week, just either studying it or out speaking it, and it was such an amazing experience doing that. And
did you start dreaming in Chinese?
Well, so that's kind of my point. Like when you start to learn a new language, you actually in some ways start to think a little differently. And that was one of the best parts about the whole experience. And also, you see it more practically when you're having conversation. I was out at I made very fast friends very quickly with a local Chinese guy. He was a TV director at the time. I just met him randomly, and he kind of took me in and he introduced me to a bunch of his friends. He'd take me out to parties and stuff. And we went to this one party one night, and the guy sitting across from me was really standoffish. And he didn't speak any English. Finally, I'm like, did I do something to offend you? He's like, I just don't like Americans. I'm like, well, have you ever met an American? And he said no. And I said, well, how do you? And we ended up just getting into this conversation, which lasted. Well, yeah, he didn't speak any English, and we ended up getting into this conversation, which lasted for quite a while. And then from that night on, it was me, the original guy who brought me to the party, and then this third guy who told me he didn't like me and Americans, and the three of us would go out, at least once a week. The entire time that I lived there. And had I not been able to respond to him or even engage him in conversation, that never would have happened. And I think it still never would have happened, even if I had a real-time translation device, because there's just, a different level of connection and a different level of appreciation, I think, that you have, like actually going through the process to spend the time learning the culture or the person or the way they think. And I think that's just a really beautiful experience. So even when we have the capability to do a lot of things like translate language, we should still invest our time into the human
Yes.
aspect of what underlies all this technology, And to me, not doing that is over-reliance.
What this anecdote reminds me of is sort of when people were very much having these debates about returning to office, and functionally virtual, we meet virtually every week and it works. And I feel like I know you guys, but it's not in the same way that I would know you guys if we were in person. And that's
100%.
exactly what your anecdote reminded me of, Shane.
Yeah, that's true. And we missed you last time you were at UCLA.
Yeah.
So next time.
Next time I'll catch you guys.
Are you going to close us up?
Well, I was going to say, we have concluded our 3 lightning rounds. I had fun. I think having to switch very quickly between the topics, in a way helped me not even just try to linger on a point that I'd missed. Maybe would do that in an extended discussion, but no, we just moved on through and I had fun. In that case, Shane, maybe you can take us home and let people know where to find us.
Yeah. Well, I think we should definitely maybe think about some future episodes where we focus on maybe just one of these topics. I think wearables in itself justifies a full episode, maybe even a few, because that industry, the industry is going to keep changing. But yeah, you can find us at getcoai.com. GetCoAI is also the handle for all of our social channels. We think we're up to a lot of really interesting things. If you just don't know where to start, if you are curious about any of the technologies or tools that we mentioned today, we've got a ton of leaderboards up on the site in pretty much any category you can think of. That'll continue to evolve. We love to hear from you. If you need help thinking about your strategy, how to use the tool, what tool to use, give us a shout, reach out. We love to hear from you.
Yep. And let us know if you enjoyed this format or if you didn't enjoy this format, because we will take that feedback seriously.
Yeah, exactly. We're reinforced by comments. So it's like, it's like we're changing our ways. But I just want to thank you, Francesca. You did a good job at organizing this one, and we will see you next week. Thanks a lot.
All right. Bye.
Bye.